My manager said I was fired forever. Then the owner called with a $500,000 bonus. The coffee in my mug had gone cold hours ago, but I barely noticed. My fingers danced across the keyboard as I put the finishing touches on the quarterly report that had consumed my last 3 weeks. The numbers were perfect, the analysis was thorough, and I knew this would be the document that finally proved my worth to the company. After 5 years of grinding through 60-hour weeks, missing family dinners, and sacrificing weekends, I was ready to show them what I could do. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I saved the document for the 20th time that morning. My cubicle was a shrine to dedication. Stacks of completed projects, commendation emails printed and pinned to the wall, and a small plant that somehow survived despite my chaotic schedule. I glanced at my watch. 7:47 a.m. Most of my colleagues wouldn't arrive for another hour, but I had been here since 6:30, same as always. "Morning, Sarah." I called out to the cleaning lady who was emptying trash bins nearby. She smiled and waved, one of the few people who saw me during these early hours. I had become part of the building's morning routine, as reliable as the sunrise. The elevator dinged, and I looked up to see Mr. Davis stepping out. My stomach tightened slightly. Robert Davis had been my manager for 3 years, and our relationship had always been complicated. He was the type who took credit for successes and distributed blame for failures. Still, I had learned to navigate his moods and demands, thinking that consistent performance would eventually earn his respect. But something was different about his expression today. His usual Monday morning scowl was replaced by something colder, more determined. He walked directly toward my desk, his leather shoes clicking against the polished floor with purpose. Other employees began filtering in, their casual chatter creating a backdrop of normalcy that felt increasingly surreal. "Good morning, Mr. Davis," I said, forcing a smile. "I just finished the quarterly analysis you requested. The numbers are actually better than we projected, and I found some interesting patterns in the customer retention data that—" "We need to talk," he interrupted, his voice flat and emotionless. "My office. Now." The words hit me like ice water. In 5 years, I had never been called into his office first thing Monday morning. My mind raced through the possibilities. Had I made an error in the report? Was this about the Henderson account? I followed him across the office floor, feeling the curious glances of my coworkers. Jennifer from accounting gave me a sympathetic look, as if she already knew something I didn't. Mr. Davis's office was a monument to corporate success, awards, certificates, and photos of him shaking hands with important-looking people. He gestured for me to sit in the chair across from his mahogany desk, but remained standing himself. The power dynamic was clear and intentional. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, not making eye contact. "Your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately." The words seemed to echo in the small space. I felt my heart skip several beats, and for a moment, I wondered if I had misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" "You're fired. Security will escort you out, and you'll receive information about your final paycheck and benefits within the week." He finally looked at me, and I saw nothing in his eyes. No regret, no explanation, just cold finality. "But I don't understand. My performance reviews have been excellent. I just finished the quarterly report and the numbers are—" "This isn't up for discussion," he cut me off. "The decision has been made. I need you to clean out your desk and leave the building within the hour." My world tilted on its axis. 5 years of my life, countless late nights, missed birthdays, postponed vacations, all of it suddenly meaningless. "Can you at least tell me why? What did I do wrong?" For the first time, something flickered across his face. Was it guilt? Satisfaction? I couldn't tell. Sometimes companies need to make difficult decisions. That's all I can say. I sat there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. My mind scrambled for explanations, for some logical reason why this was occurring. Had I unknowingly violated a policy? Was this about budget cuts? Was there some office drama I had missed? "I need to know why," I said again, my voice stronger now. "After everything I've given to this company, I deserve an explanation." Mr. Davis sighed and sat down, finally meeting my gaze. Look, this isn't personal. It's business. Sometimes people just don't fit the direction the company is heading. Your style of work, your approach to projects, it's not what we need going forward. The words stung more than I expected. My approach to work was thorough, dedicated, and results-driven. What more could they want? What about the Morrison project? The client specifically requested to work with me again. What about the efficiency improvements I implemented last quarter? That's all in the past now, he said, standing up again. Security will be here in a few minutes to escort you out. I suggest you start packing your things. As I walked back to my cubicle in a daze, I felt like I was moving through water. Everything seemed muffled and distant. My coworkers' conversations faded into background noise as I began mechanically placing my belongings into the cardboard box that security had provided. The printed emails that had once been sources of pride now felt like relics from someone else's life. "What's happening?" whispered Tom from the next cubicle over. "Are you okay?" I couldn't find the words to answer him. How do you explain that your entire professional identity has just been erased? That the place you considered a second home has suddenly become foreign territory? The small plant went into the box, along with my coffee mug, the stress ball from the company picnic, and the photo of my family that had motivated me through countless difficult days. Each item felt heavier than it should have, weighted with memories and shattered expectations. 2 security guards appeared at my desk, their presence making the situation feel even more surreal. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us," one of them said gently. He was younger than I expected, probably new to the job, and he looked almost as uncomfortable as I felt. As I carried my box of belongings toward the elevator, I could feel the stares of my colleagues. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, and a few seemed to be calculating whether they might be next. The elevator ride down felt eternal, each floor marking my descent from professional relevance to unemployment. The lobby that I had walked through thousands of times suddenly felt like a foreign country. The familiar security desk, the company logo on the wall, the comfortable seating area where I had sometimes eaten lunch, all of it now belonged to a world I was no longer part of. Outside, the morning sun felt harsh and unforgiving. I stood on the sidewalk, holding my box of belongings, watching people hurry past on their way to jobs they still had. The city continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the fact that my world had just collapsed. As I walked toward my car, one thought kept circling in my mind. How could this happen to me? After all my hard work, all my dedication, all the sacrifices I had made for this company, how could it end like this? The unfairness of it all threatened to overwhelm me, and I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. I placed the box in my trunk and sat in my car for a long time, staring at the building that had defined so much of my adult life. The windows of the 15th floor, where my desk had been, reflected the morning sun back at me like a wall of mirrors. Somewhere behind those windows, my former colleagues were going about their Monday morning routines, probably already speculating about why I was gone and whether they were safe. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and half-formed thoughts. How would I tell my family? How would I explain this to my friends? How would I pay my mortgage? The questions multiplied faster than I could process them, each one adding to the weight of uncertainty that had settled on my chest. When I finally reached my apartment, I sat in my living room with the box of belongings at my feet, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The familiar furniture and decorations seemed to mock me, reminders of a life that had been built on the assumption of job security and professional growth. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank screen, knowing I should start updating my resume, should begin the process of job hunting, should take action to move forward. But the screen remained blank, just like my future seemed to be. For the first time in 5 years, I had nowhere to be, no deadlines to meet, no meetings to attend. The silence was deafening, broken only by the tick of the clock on my wall, a clock that had once measured productive hours and now seemed to count down to an uncertain future. I had always defined myself by my work, by my role in the company, by my professional achievements. Now, sitting in my apartment in the middle of a Monday morning, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The weight of the unknown pressed down on me as I finally allowed myself to cry for the career that had been taken from me, for the trust that had been betrayed, and for the future that suddenly felt impossible to imagine. 3 days had passed since the firing, and I still couldn't bring myself to look at job postings. My laptop sat closed on the coffee table, surrounded by empty takeout containers and crumpled tissues. I had called in sick to my own life, avoiding phone calls from concerned friends and family members who had heard the news through my sister. The apartment felt smaller each day, like the walls were slowly closing in on me. I had always been a morning person, but now I found myself sleeping until noon, then lying in bed for another hour, staring at the ceiling and replaying that horrible conversation with Mr. Davis. What had I missed? What signs had I ignored? My phone had been buzzing intermittently with messages I couldn't bring myself to read. LinkedIn notifications about job opportunities felt like salt in an open wound. Text messages from former colleagues expressing shock and offering support only reminded me of how publicly my failure had been displayed. It was Thursday afternoon when everything changed. I was mindlessly scrolling through streaming services, looking for something to distract me from my own thoughts, when my phone rang. The ringtone cut through the silence like a fire alarm, making me jump. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see my sister's name or maybe another well-meaning friend. Instead, I saw a number I didn't recognize with a name that made my heart skip. Alex Hayes, CEO. Alex Hayes, the company owner. The man whose signature was on the company-wide emails, whose portrait hung in the lobby, whose name was whispered with reverence in the halls. I had never spoken to him directly, had only seen him from a distance during quarterly meetings where he addressed the entire company from the stage. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. What could he possibly want with me? Was this some kind of exit interview? A legal matter? My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won out. I swiped to answer. Hello. My voice came out raspier than I intended. Is this speaking with the project analyst who single-handedly increased our client retention rate by 37% last quarter? The voice was warm, confident, and completely unexpected. I sat up straight on my couch, suddenly very aware that I was wearing 3-day-old pajamas. Yes, this is me. Mr. Hayes? Please call me Alex. I apologize for calling you directly, but I wanted to speak with you personally before word gets out about your situation. I've been following your work very closely, and I have to say, I'm impressed. More than impressed, actually. My brain struggled to process what I was hearing. I'm sorry, I don't understand. I was terminated on Monday, Mr. Davis said. Mr. Davis, Alex interrupted, and I could hear something sharp in his tone. Yes, we'll need to discuss that. But first, I want to talk about your future. Tell me, what do you know about strategic project development? The question came out of nowhere. I've worked on several strategic initiatives over the years. The Morrison account restructuring, the efficiency optimization project, the client feedback integration system. Exactly. You see, I've been watching how you approach problems. You don't just complete tasks, you see the bigger picture. You understand systems thinking. That's a rare quality, and it's exactly what I've been looking for. I felt like I was having a conversation in a foreign language. Mr. Hayes, I'm not sure what you're getting at. I was fired. I don't work for the company anymore. About that, he said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. What if I told you that your termination was premature? What if I told you that I have a position available that would not only reinstate you, but elevate you to a level where you could really make an impact? The room began to spin slightly. I don't understand what's happening right now. I'm offering you a role as Director of Strategic Projects. It's a new position, one that reports directly to me. The salary is $180,000 annually, plus benefits, plus a signing bonus of $500,000. I dropped my phone. Actually dropped it. The device clattered onto the coffee table, and I could hear Alex's voice continuing through the speaker. I scrambled to pick it up, my hands shaking. I'm sorry, I dropped the phone. Did you say $500,000? I did. And that's just the beginning. This role would give you complete autonomy over strategic initiatives, your own team, and the authority to implement changes that could transform how we do business. You'd be working on projects that could reshape the entire company. My mind reeled. 24 hours ago, I had been considering whether I could afford next month's rent. Now, someone was offering me more money than I had ever imagined earning. But why me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. There are people with more experience, more qualifications. Because you have something that can't be taught, Alex said. You have vision. You see solutions where others see problems. You think 3 steps ahead. And most importantly, you care about the work itself, not just the paycheck. I stood up and began pacing my small living room, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. This feels surreal. 3 days ago, I was fired. Now you're offering me a promotion and $500,000? The business world moves fast, Alex said with a chuckle. Sometimes opportunities come from unexpected places. The question is, are you ready to take a leap of faith? I stopped pacing and looked at myself in the mirror across the room. The woman staring back at me looked tired, confused, but for the first time in days, there was a spark of something in her eyes. Hope, maybe, or possibility. What about Mr. Davis? I asked. He was pretty clear about not wanting me in the company. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mr. Davis will be adjusting to the new organizational structure. Let's just say that not all management decisions align with the company's best interests. Sometimes, talent gets overlooked because of personal biases. The implication hung in the air between us. I thought about the way Mr. Davis had looked at me during the termination meeting, the coldness in his eyes, the complete lack of explanation. I need you to understand, Alex continued. This isn't charity. This is business. I'm investing in you because I believe you can deliver results that will more than justify the investment. But I need to know you're committed to excellence, not just grateful for a second chance. I took a deep breath, feeling like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. What would I need to do? First, you'd need to sign a confidentiality agreement. This role involves sensitive information and strategic planning that can't be shared with the general employee population. Second, you'd be starting Monday. And third, you'd need to be prepared for some resistance from existing management. The mention of resistance made my stomach tighten, but the thought of walking back into that building with a new title, a new purpose, and a $500,000 bonus made it seem manageable. I accept, I said, surprising myself with a firmness in my voice. Excellent. I'll have the paperwork delivered to you by Friday. Welcome to the executive team. As I hung up the phone, I realized my hands were still shaking. But this time, it wasn't from devastation. It was from pure, electric anticipation. Friday morning arrived with a knock on my door that made my heart race. A courier stood outside holding a thick manila envelope marked Confidential, Alex Hayes, CEO. My name was written in bold letters across the front, and suddenly everything felt real again. Inside my apartment, I spread the documents across my dining table like pieces of a puzzle I was trying to solve. The employment contract was unlike anything I had ever seen. Director of Strategic Projects. Salary, $180,000 annually. Signing bonus, $500,000. The numbers seemed to glow on the page, but it was the job description that made my breath catch. The director will oversee covert operational improvements, identify inefficiencies in management structures, and implement strategic changes with complete autonomy. Covert. The word sent a chill down my spine. I continued reading, my excitement mixing with growing unease. This position requires absolute discretion. The director will report only to the CEO and will have access to all departmental data, employee records, and financial information. The nature of this role must remain confidential to ensure the effectiveness of strategic initiatives. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex Hayes. Review the documents carefully. This isn't just a job, it's a mission. Are you ready to see what's really happening in your former company?
What was really happening?
I had worked there for 5 years, but suddenly I felt like I had been living in a bubble, seeing only what I was supposed to see. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. Saturday was spent researching everything I could about Alex Hayes. I discovered he had built the company from nothing, starting with just 3 employees in a cramped office. He was known for his hands-on approach and his ability to spot talent that others missed. But I also found articles about his ruthless business tactics, his willingness to make difficult decisions for the good of the company. The more I read, the more I realized that my termination might not have been the end of something, but the beginning of something much bigger. Sunday evening, I received another call from Alex. "I trust you've reviewed the materials?" "I have," I said, though I wasn't sure I fully understood what I was agreeing to. "But I need to ask, why all the secrecy? Why not just promote me through normal channels?" There was a pause. "Because what you're going to discover can't be handled through normal channels. There are problems in the company that run deeper than you know. Systems that have been broken for years. People who have been protecting their own interests instead of the company's. People like Mr. Davis?" "Mr. Davis is just the beginning. Your job will be to identify these problems, document them, and help me fix them. But you'll need to do it without anyone knowing what you're really doing. As far as the company is concerned, you're working on special projects that require confidentiality." I felt like I was being recruited for some kind of corporate espionage. What if I find things that implicate people I know, people I've worked with? Then you'll document those findings and report them to me. This isn't about friendship or loyalty to individuals. It's about the integrity of the company and the livelihoods of everyone who depends on it. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders. I would be walking back into that building not as the fired employee, but as someone with power to expose secrets, to change lives, to potentially destroy careers. "There's something else," Alex continued. "Your office will be on the executive floor, 2 levels above your old department. You'll have your own assistant, your own budget, and access to information that most vice presidents don't see. But you'll also be completely isolated from your former colleagues. This role requires that kind of separation." Monday morning came faster than I expected. I stood in my closet, selecting clothes for what felt like the most important day of my life. The professional wardrobe that had hung unused for a week suddenly felt like armor I was putting on for battle. The drive to the office was surreal. The same route I had taken thousands of times, but everything looked different. The building where I had been humiliated just a week ago was now the place where I would wield unprecedented power. I parked in the executive garage, using the key card that had been included in my welcome package. The elevator that took me to the executive floor was one I had never ridden before. It required special access, and as the doors opened, I stepped into a world of marble floors, expensive artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city. My office was at the end of the hall, with my name already on the door: Director of Strategic Projects, Confidential Operations. The space was 3 times the size of my old cubicle, with a view that looked directly down onto the floor where I used to work. I could see my former colleagues at their desks, probably wondering what had happened to me, never imagining that I was now looking down at them from above. On my desk was a tablet loaded with company data I had never seen before. Employee performance reviews, departmental budgets, internal communications, and something called management efficiency reports. As I scrolled through the information, patterns began to emerge. Projects that had been delayed without explanation. Budget overruns that had been covered up. Employees who had been passed over for promotions despite excellent performance. And at the center of many of these issues was one name that appeared repeatedly: Robert Davis. My intercom buzzed, and my new assistant's voice came through. "Ms. Director, Mr. Hayes would like to see you in his office at your earliest convenience." As I walked down the hall toward the CEO's office, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflective windows. The woman looking back at me stood straighter, walked with more purpose, and carried herself with a confidence that had been absent just days before. But beneath that confidence was a growing realization of what I had truly accepted. This wasn't just a job or even a promotion. It was a complete transformation of who I was and what I represented in this company. I was no longer just an employee. I was Alex Hayes' secret weapon, armed with information and authority that could reshape everything. The question that kept echoing in my mind as I approached the CEO's door was simple but profound. Was I ready for the power I now possessed? And more importantly, was I prepared for the consequences of using it? It was Tuesday morning, my second day in the new role, when I first saw him. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when movement in the hallway caught my eye. Through my glass door, I watched Mr. Davis stride past, his face a mask of barely contained fury. He stopped abruptly, backed up, and stared directly at my nameplate. The look on his face was something I will never forget. His mouth fell open slightly, his eyes widened with disbelief, and then his expression hardened into something that looked like pure rage. For 30 seconds, we stared at each other through the glass, him in the hallway, me behind my executive desk. The power dynamic had shifted so dramatically that the air between us seemed to crackle with electricity. He pushed through my door without knocking, his usual corporate composure completely abandoned. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, gesturing wildly at my office. "What kind of game are you playing?" I had prepared for this moment, but nothing could have readied me for the raw intensity of his anger. "Good morning, Mr. Davis. I'm working on strategic projects for the company. Is there something I can help you with?" "Don't play innocent with me," he snarled, stepping closer to my desk. "You were fired. I fired you. You're not supposed to be here, and you're definitely not supposed to be sitting in an executive office pretending to be important." The irony wasn't lost on me. A week ago, this man had the power to destroy my career with a single sentence. Now, I had access to information that could end his. I report directly to Mr. Hayes now. If you have concerns about my role, I suggest you discuss them with him. His face flushed red. "This is insane. You're nobody. You were a cubicle worker, a glorified data entry clerk. And now you think you can waltz in here and... I interrupted, my voice steady despite my racing heart, that I should focus on the work I've been assigned, which, coincidentally, includes reviewing management efficiency across all departments. The threat was subtle but clear. His eyes narrowed as he processed the implications. "You're bluffing. Hayes wouldn't give someone like you access to sensitive information." I turned my computer screen toward him, showing the management efficiency reports I had been reviewing. His name appeared highlighted in red across multiple categories: budget overruns, project delays, and employee complaints. The color drained from his face. "These are confidential documents," he whispered, his bluster evaporating. "Yes, they are. And they make for very interesting reading." I closed the file and leaned back in my chair. "Is there anything else you needed, Mr. Davis?" He stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "This isn't over," he said finally, his voice low and menacing. "Whatever game you're playing, whatever you think you're doing, it won't work. I've been here for 15 years. I have relationships, connections, influence. You're just a temporary inconvenience." After he left, I sat in my office trembling with adrenaline. The encounter had been both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in my career, I had been the one with power in a confrontation with him. But his threat lingered in my mind. He wasn't going to accept this situation quietly. By Wednesday, the subtle warfare had begun. In the company-wide meeting that afternoon, I attended as part of the executive team for the first time. When Alex Hayes introduced me as the new director of strategic projects, I watched Mr. Davis's face from across the conference room. He was seated with the other department heads, and his expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his jaw. "The director will be conducting comprehensive reviews of our operational efficiency," Alex announced. "All department heads should provide full cooperation with these strategic initiatives." The meeting continued with routine business, but I noticed how Mr. Davis began subtly undermining the conversation. When Alex mentioned the quarterly performance improvements, Mr. Davis interjected with concerns about unrealistic expectations and the need for more experienced oversight in strategic planning. Each comment was carefully crafted to sound reasonable while actually questioning my qualifications. He never mentioned me by name, but everyone in the room understood the subtext. The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly sensing the tension but uncertain about the dynamics at play. After the meeting, I overheard him talking to Jennifer Morrison, the HR director, near the coffee station. "I just think we need to be careful about rapid organizational changes," he was saying. "Sometimes new positions are created without proper vetting of candidates. We wouldn't want any complications. The campaign against me was beginning, just as I had feared. But I had weapons he didn't know about. That evening, I stayed late reviewing his department's records more thoroughly.
What I found was damning.
Over the past 18 months, Mr. Davis had systematically blocked promotions for high-performing employees while protecting underperformers who happened to be his personal friends. The Morrison account that had been such a success? He had tried to prevent me from working on it, arguing that it was too complex for my skill level. Most disturbing was a pattern of budget manipulations. He had been inflating project costs and funneling the excess into a discretionary fund that he used for team-building activities, expensive dinners, golf outings, and conference trips to luxury resorts, all attended exclusively by his inner circle. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed more before I could present it to Alex Hayes. I needed proof that would be impossible to dispute or explain away. Thursday brought another confrontation. I was in the break room when Mr. Davis appeared, flanked by two of his department supervisors. The message was clear. He wasn't alone in this fight. "I hope you're enjoying your temporary promotion," he said, his voice dripping with false pleasantness. "But I'd be careful about making enemies. This company is built on relationships, and some of us have been building those relationships for a very long time." One of his supervisors, a man named Paul who had never spoken to me before, chimed in. "It's just unusual, you know? Someone getting promoted so quickly after being let go makes people wonder what's really going on." The implication was clear. They were spreading rumors, questioning my integrity, suggesting that there was something inappropriate about my rapid rise. It was a classic power play, designed to isolate me and undermine my credibility. "I understand your concerns," I replied calmly. "I'm sure Mr. Hayes would be happy to address any questions about company personnel decisions." As they walked away, I heard Paul whisper to Mr. Davis, "She's not going to last long. Hayes will figure out his mistakes soon enough." But what they didn't know was that I had already scheduled a meeting with Alex Hayes for Friday morning. I had a folder full of evidence, a clear picture of the problems in Mr. Davis's department, and a growing understanding of just how deep the corruption ran. The fight had begun, and I was preparing to fire the first shot. Friday morning arrived with the weight of destiny hanging over it. I sat in my office at 6:30 a.m., surrounded by printed reports, spreadsheets, and evidence that painted a clear picture of systematic corruption. The meeting with Alex Hayes was scheduled for 9 a.m., and I had 3 hours to finalize my presentation that would either vindicate my position or destroy it completely. The folder on my desk contained everything: budget irregularities dating back 2 years, email chains showing favoritism in hiring decisions, and performance reviews that had been deliberately altered to protect underperforming employees while penalizing those who threatened Mr. Davis's authority. But the most damning evidence was a series of expense reports that showed him charging personal expenses to company accounts, cleverly disguised as business costs. My hands shook slightly as I organized the documents. This wasn't just about proving my worth anymore. It was about exposing a system of corruption that had been festering for years. The magnitude of what I was about to do hit me like a physical blow. I was essentially ending Robert Davis's career. At 8:45 a.m., I walked down the hall toward Alex Hayes' office, my folder clutched against my chest like armor. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret, looked up from her desk with a knowing smile. "He's expecting you. Good luck." The CEO's office was even more impressive than I had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the walls were lined with awards and photographs documenting the company's growth from startup to corporate giant. Alex Hayes sat behind a massive oak desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Please sit," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I'm eager to hear what you've discovered." I placed the folder on his desk and took a deep breath. "Mr. Hayes, what I'm about to show you will require immediate action. The problems in Mr. Davis's department aren't just inefficiencies. They're systematic violations of company policy and potentially criminal activity." For the next 30 minutes, I walked him through every piece of evidence. I showed him the budget manipulations, the falsified performance reviews, the questionable expense reports. With each revelation, his expression grew more serious, more focused. "This is worse than I suspected," he said finally, closing the folder. "Robert has been operating his department like a personal fiefdom. The question now is, how do we handle this without destroying morale across the entire company?" "I have a plan," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "But it will require complete support from you, and it won't be easy." Over the next hour, we developed a strategy. I would continue gathering evidence while implementing new oversight procedures disguised as efficiency improvements. Meanwhile, Alex would begin the process of building a case that would be strong enough to survive any legal challenge Mr. Davis might mount. But first, I had to prove that I could actually do the job I'd been hired for. The real test came the following week when I was assigned to lead a team of 6 analysts on a project to streamline our client communication systems. These were people who had been with the company for years, and they knew I had been fired just 2 weeks earlier. Their skepticism was palpable when I walked into our first team meeting. "I know this situation is unusual," I began, addressing the elephant in the room immediately. 2 weeks ago, I was working in a cubicle like most of you. Now I'm leading this team. I understand if you have questions about my qualifications or my authority." Sarah Chun, a senior analyst who had been with the company for 7 years, spoke up. "With all due respect, we've been doing this job for a long time. We've seen directors come and go. What makes you different?" It was a fair question, and I had prepared for it. "I'm different because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to have ideas that get ignored, to see inefficiencies that management doesn't want to address, to work late nights on projects that someone else takes credit for." The room fell silent. I had their attention. "This project isn't about me proving I deserve this position," I continued. "It's about us proving that when talented people are given the resources and authority to make real changes, amazing things can happen." Over the next 2 weeks, something extraordinary occurred. The team began to trust me, not because of my title, but because I listened to their ideas and gave them credit for their contributions. Maria Rodriguez, a junior analyst, proposed a client feedback system that would save the company thousands of hours annually. Instead of dismissing it or claiming it as my own idea, I presented it to the executive team with her name prominently featured. The results were immediate and impressive. Our client satisfaction scores increased by 15% in just 2 weeks. Response times improved by 40%. The team began working longer hours voluntarily, driven by the excitement of seeing their ideas implemented rather than buried in bureaucracy. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Tom Williams, who had worked in my old department, approached me after a company meeting. "I don't know what you're doing up there," he said, nodding toward the executive floor, "but whatever it is, keep doing it. People are talking about how different things feel when you're involved in projects." Even more surprising was the reaction from other department heads. Jennifer Morrison from HR requested a meeting to discuss implementing similar team structures in her department. The head of marketing asked if I could review their client retention strategies. But with success came increased scrutiny from Mr. Davis. He began attending meetings where I presented project updates, asking pointed questions designed to expose any weaknesses in my approach. During one particularly tense presentation, he interrupted me mid-sentence. "These improvements are all well and good," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "but I'm concerned about the long-term sustainability of these changes. Are we sure we're not just seeing temporary results from increased attention rather than genuine improvement?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew this was more than a professional question. It was a direct challenge to my competence and authority. I looked him directly in the eye and smiled. "That's an excellent question, Mr. Davis. Which is why I've been tracking not just immediate results, but also the underlying process improvements that ensure these changes will be sustainable. Would you like me to walk you through the data?" For the next 10 minutes, I presented detailed analysis that showed not just what we had accomplished, but how we had built systems to maintain those improvements indefinitely. By the end of my presentation, Mr. Davis was sitting back in his chair, his face a mask of barely controlled frustration. But I wasn't finished. In fact, I'd welcome the opportunity to review your department's processes to see if we can implement similar improvements there. I'm sure there are efficiencies we could identify. The offer was made in front of the entire executive team, and everyone understood the implications. I was essentially offering to audit his department, something that would expose all the problems I had already documented. His response was swift and predictable. I appreciate the offer, but my department is performing well within established parameters. We don't need external review. Alex Hayes, who had been quietly observing the exchange, leaned forward. Actually, Robert, I think that's exactly what we need. A fresh perspective could be very valuable. Let's schedule that review for next week. The look Mr. Davis gave me across the conference table was pure hatred. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I wasn't afraid of him. I had earned my place at this table through results, not drama. I had proven that I could not only do the job, but excel at it. As the meeting ended and people filed out, I remained seated, organizing my notes. Mr. Davis lingered as well, and when we were alone, he approached my chair. "You think you've won," he said quietly, his voice filled with venom. "But you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. I've been protecting this company from people like you for 15 years. Alex Hayes might be impressed by your little dog and pony show, but I know what you really are." I stood up slowly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "What I really am," I said calmly, "is someone who actually cares about this company's success more than protecting my own territory. And that's exactly why I'm going to succeed where you've failed." As I walked out of the conference room, I could feel his eyes burning into my back. The final confrontation was coming, and I was ready for it. The audit of Mr. Davis's department took place over 3 days, and what we uncovered exceeded even my expectations. The evidence was overwhelming: $47,000 in fraudulent expense claims, systematic discrimination against high-performing employees, and a pattern of project delays that had cost the company nearly $200,000 in lost revenue. But the most shocking discovery was a series of emails between Mr. Davis and a competitor discussing information sharing about upcoming project bids. When I presented the final report to Alex Hayes, his face was grim. "This is worse than corporate mismanagement," he said, closing the folder. "This borders on corporate espionage." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I want you to be there when I fire him." The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 4 p.m. in Alex's office. I arrived early, my heart pounding despite my confidence in the evidence. This was the moment I had been building toward for 3 weeks, the complete reversal of the power dynamic that had destroyed my career just a month ago. Mr. Davis entered the office with his usual swagger, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He glanced at me sitting in the corner, and his expression hardened. "What is she doing here?" "She's here because this concerns her investigation," Alex replied calmly. "Please sit down, Robert." For the next 20 minutes, Alex methodically presented the evidence. With each revelation, I watched Mr. Davis's composure crumble. The man who had once wielded absolute power over my career was now squirming in his chair, offering increasingly desperate explanations. "These are misunderstandings," he said when confronted with the expense fraud. "Accounting errors that can be corrected." "And the emails to our competitor?" Alex asked, his voice ice cold. Those were taken out of context. I was trying to gather intelligence on their operations, not share our information." I had remained silent throughout the presentation, but now Alex turned to me. "Do you have anything to add?" I looked directly at Mr. Davis, and for a moment, I saw not the intimidating authority figure who had terrorized me for years, but a desperate man whose world was collapsing around him.
Part of me felt sorry for him.
But then I remembered the humiliation, the dismissal without explanation, the systematic oppression of talented employees. "Mr. Davis," I said quietly, "you told me that sometimes companies need to make difficult decisions. That sometimes people just don't fit the direction the company is heading. You said it wasn't personal, it was business." His face went pale as he realized I was using his own words against him. "Well," I continued, "this isn't personal either. It's business. And the business can't afford to keep someone who puts their own interests above the company's success." Alex Hayes leaned forward in his chair. "Robert, your employment with this company is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and you'll be contacted by our legal department regarding the irregularities we've discovered." The parallel to my own firing was intentional and complete. Mr. Davis sat in stunned silence for a moment, then turned to look at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "You think you've won," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you have no idea what it's like to carry the weight of real responsibility. The decisions you'll have to make, the people you'll have to disappoint. This job will eat you alive." "Maybe," I replied. "But I'll make those decisions based on what's best for the company and its employees, not what's best for protecting my own position." As security escorted him out, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Victory, certainly, but also a profound sense of responsibility. I had proven that I could identify problems and hold people accountable, but now I had to prove that I could build something better. Over the following weeks, the transformation was remarkable. With Mr. Davis gone, his department began to flourish. The talented employees who had been suppressed suddenly found their voices. Maria Rodriguez, the analyst whose ideas had been consistently ignored, was promoted to team lead. Tom Williams, who had been passed over for advancement 3 times, was finally given the recognition he deserved. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. 3 months after Mr. Davis's termination, I received a call from him. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice lacking the arrogance I remembered. "I've had time to think about what happened, and I realized that I let my fear of being replaced cloud my judgment. You were right about the department. You were right about the company. And you were right about me." The apology was surprising, but what came next was even more so. "I found another job," he continued. "A smaller company, but they're giving me a chance to start over. I want you to know that I'm doing things differently now. I'm trying to be the kind of manager I should have been all along." After I hung up, I sat in my office, the same office where I had first confronted him, and reflected on the journey. The $500,000 bonus had been deposited into my account, but it was no longer just about the money. It was about proving that talent and dedication could overcome drama and favoritism. I looked out my window at the city skyline, the same view I had admired on my first day in this office. But now it looked different. It looked like possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex Hayes. "Board meeting next week. We're discussing your promotion to Vice President of Strategic Operations. Are you ready for the next challenge?" I smiled as I typed my response. I've been ready my whole career. I just needed the right opportunity to prove it. As I packed up my things to leave for the weekend, I caught my reflection in the office window. The woman looking back at me was confident, accomplished, and unafraid. She had learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing that can happen to you. The firing that had seemed like the end of my world had actually been the beginning of my real career. I had discovered that I wasn't just capable of surviving adversity, I was capable of thriving because of it. Walking to the elevator, I realized that this was only the beginning. There would be new challenges, new obstacles, new people who would underestimate me. But I was no longer the person who could be intimidated or dismissed. I was someone who had learned to turn setbacks into comebacks, who had discovered that true power comes not from the authority others give you, but from the strength you find within yourself. As the elevator doors closed, I thought about the woman who had packed up her belongings in a cardboard box just a month ago. She had been devastated, humiliated, and lost. But she had also been on the verge of the greatest transformation of her life. Sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're truly capable of achieving. Sometimes you have to be fired to find your real calling. And sometimes, the person who destroys your old life is actually doing you the biggest favor possible. They're forcing you to build a better one. The elevator opened on the ground floor, and I stepped out into the lobby where this whole journey had begun. But this time, I wasn't carrying a box of belongings. I was carrying the knowledge that I had not only survived the worst professional experience of my life, I had used it to create the best one. As I walked through the doors and into the evening air, I smiled. This was only the beginning of my story, and I couldn't wait to see what came next.